Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches. I'm Teniola Uyitayo. On the programme today, mass polio vaccination campaign starts in Gaza, plus frustration mounts over Israel's failure to secure a ceasefire deal that would free hostages. Health workers have started a mass polio vaccination campaign in Gaza after the first case in 25 years was reported last month. The past 11 months of conflict has deprived many of their loved ones, their homes and health. With no end in sight to the war, the hope is that at least one new source of suffering can be eliminated.
Nurhan, a young mother of three, leaves the simple tents she calls home in the central Gazan city of Deir al-Balah to a health centre where her children can receive polio vaccinations. To get there, they travelled by donkey cart. Like many parents here, she says her fears of the disease outweighed her concerns at having to travel to the centre.
We came today for the polio vaccination because polio is a very serious disease and children must be vaccinated against it. I have 5 children and I brought them all for vaccination. We traveled a very long distance and the journey was difficult. As you can see, many people are here for the vaccination as well.
On Sunday, a number of UN agencies began rolling out the large-scale polio youth vaccination programme. It comes after the enclave reported the first case of polio in 25 years last month, with an 11-month-old boy left paralysed. The United Nations has delivered 1.2 million doses of the oral polio vaccine, targeting approximately 640,000 children. Each child from birth to 10 years old is set to receive 2 doses.
We have unfortunately outbreaks of type 2 vaccine-derived poliovirus in the community. To stop this transmission and to stop the suffering from people of this preventable cause, we have to vaccinate 90% of the people less than 10 years old. We regularly check the sewages in all the countries in the world to make sure that there is no polio virus. And then we did it in Gaza. And we checked the sewage in the laboratory designated by WHO, and then we found that there are poliovirus type 2 from the polio vaccine. And because of this, that we need to vaccinate all the children less than 10 years in Gaza, and we unfortunately had 1 case of polio recently. Yes. And to address this polio campaign, WHO, World Health Organization, and the UNICEF brought 1.2 million doses of polio type 2 vaccine to Gaza recently.
We are at Nusairat Unrwa Health Center. The polio vaccination in Deir al-Balah or Middle Zone has started today. In this site, we are seeing a lot of enthusiasm from the community. There is a lot of turnover from the families, and children are coming and they're really excited to receive the vaccination from the vaccinators here. So it's very encouraging that the start of the campaign is quite positive.
So far, everything is going to plan. The children are arriving, the families are here, the vaccinations are going well. We have the vaccinations in individual cool boxes to sustain the heat of the day. It seems calm and quiet in the Gaza Strip so far. The humanitarian pause is so far lasting, which is what we need to implement this vaccine campaign.
11 months into the conflict between Israel and Hamas, about 90% of all Gazans have been displaced. And with health services under huge strain, most children have seen their regular immunisations disrupted, leaving them vulnerable to infection. Palestinian health officials say they have set up more than 400 fixed vaccination sites. Israel and Hamas have agreed to pause fighting in Gaza for the vaccinations to take place. However, Israel has refused to implement a complete ceasefire, confirming only a humanitarian corridor for vaccination personnel and designated safe areas for vaccine administration during certain hours.
Meanwhile, massive protests have continued to take place across Israel as pressure mounts on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to secure a ceasefire deal in Gaza that would see remaining captives brought home. Amid a wave of backlash, the Israeli leader says he will refuse to back down on demands to control Gaza's border with Egypt during ceasefire negotiations.
Scuffles break out between protesters and police as thousands of people rally in Jerusalem near the Prime Minister's residence. Carrying placards with anti-Netanyahu messages, protesters demand an immediate deal to secure the release of the remaining hostages in Gaza.
The main problem is not Philadelphia, not Rafah, and not even the war or the continuation of the war. The main problem is that our Prime Minister is in conflict of interest. As long as the war continues, Netanyahu knows that he stays in power in Israel and there are no elections and his court is stopped due to the situation in Israel. And therefore, Netanyahu does his best to make the war last forever and not stop it.
So what happened right now that we were protesting against the war that's killing thousands of people from both sides. And what the CAP decided to do is to attack us, start hitting us, start yelling at us with their horses, with their machines, and they start telling us go away and pushing us away. And we were shouting, protesting legally against the war that's killing a lot of people, against this government that keep killing us, that keep shedding blood all over this place. This place is not holy anymore. And this CAP, what they decided to do is to hate us, to push us away, to shut us down.
Since 6 hostages were found dead in a Gaza tunnel last weekend, the weight of the war there has hung heavier on Israel's leader. A total of 97 hostages remain unaccounted for after being kidnapped by Hamas on the 7th of October last year. In a live press conference on Monday night, Benjamin Netanyahu refused to back down on demands in its negotiations over a hostage and ceasefire deal brokered by the US. A key demand of Hamas is that Israel withdraw all its forces from the strip of land along Gaza's border with Egypt, known as the Philadelphia Corridor.
I would define the end of the war in Gaza. When Hamas no longer rules Gaza. We throw them out. I would define the end of the war in World War II when the Nazis no longer rule Germany. To do that, you need to have a military victory, and you have to have also the political victory to destroy their governance. We're out to destroy the military capabilities of Hamas and the governing capabilities of Hamas, and we're well on our way to achieving both. That is total victory. What has changed in the last 5 days? What has changed? One thing. These murderers executed 6 of our hostages. They shot them in the back of the head. That's what's changed. And now after this, we're asked to show seriousness? We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages, murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions. The pressure internationally must be directed at these killers, at Hamas, not at Israel. We say yes, they say no all the time, but they also murdered these people. And now we need maximum pressure on Hamas. I don't believe that either President Biden or anyone serious about achieving peace and achieving the release would seriously ask Israel to make these concessions. We've already made them. Hamas has to make the concession.
Many protesters accuse Mr. Netanyahu of blocking a deal to prioritize his own political survival, a claim he rejects.
I'm here together with thousands of people to protest against Netanyahu government and cabinet, the decision not to promote the hostages deal is a catastrophe. I mean, putting the Philadelphia road before the hostages is outrageous and unbearable. And unfortunately, this is our government, a government that doesn't respond to the public. The decision about the Philadelphia corridor is just an excuse, another excuse for Prime Minister Netanyahu to avoid signing on the hostage release deal, which has been there on the table for many months. It's just an excuse not to sign.
French Foreign Minister
Pressure this week also mounted internationally as the UK suspended some arms sales to Israel, citing a risk of equipment being used to violate international law.
This government is not an international court. We have not and could not arbitrate on whether or not Israel has breached international humanitarian law. This is a forward-looking evaluation, not a determination of innocence or guilt, and it does not prejudge any future determinations by the competent courts. But facing a conflict such as this, it is this government's legal duty to review export licenses. Criteria 2C of the Strategic Export Licensing Criteria states that the government will not issue export licenses if there is a clear risk that the items might be used to commit or facilitate serious violations of international humanitarian law. It is with regret that I inform the House today the assessment I have received leaves me unable to conclude anything other than that for certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. I have informed my Right Honourable friend, the Business and Trade Secretary, and he is therefore today announcing the suspension of around 30 from a total of approximately 350 to Israel as required under the Export Controls Act. These include equipment that we assess is for use in the current conflict in Gaza.
Unlike the US, Britain's government does not give arms directly to Israel, but rather issues licenses for companies to sell weapons with input from lawyers on whether they complied with international law. The Israeli Prime Minister described the UK's decision as shameful. Western governments have been coming under growing pressure to halt arms sales to Israel over how it is waging the war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, as Sudan war drags on, millions still languish in displacement camps. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the programme. More than 500 days have passed since the war in Sudan broke out in April 2023, as the two warring factions remain locked in a deadly power struggle. Thousands of people have died, cities have turned to rubble, and entire communities have been displaced. With no end to the violence, many continue to flee to neighbouring countries, including South Sudan, where at least 1,000 people cross the border daily. 30-year-old mother of 6, Lamia, is still grappling with the grief and trauma of the violence that tore through Khartoum, forcing her to leave her home. Lamia lost both her sister-in-law and an aunt who raised her. After a 3-day journey, she crossed to the South Sudanese border town of Rank, where about 1,000 people escaping the conflict arrive every day.
وقع في مدانة قبل ما نحن نحاول نمرق أصلا إحنا ما كان عندنا الفكرة بتاعت إحنا نمرق.
We didn't want to leave Sudan. It wasn't until the bomb fell on our neighbor's house that we decided to leave. We thought it would pass, but a short while later, we started hearing gunfire, heavy gunfire. After the neighbor's house was hit, and after seeing the news on TV, we had to leave.
خلاص قمنا مرقنا.
The constant flow of men, women and children seeking safety is overwhelming Rank's 2 transit centres, which were designed to hold 4,000 people, but now support more than 9,000. Many South Sudanese returnees continue the long journey back to their communities. 10 million people have been forcibly displaced since Sudan's newest conflict began. Of these, around 2 million have sought refuge in neighboring countries, including South Sudan, which is already reeling from the impacts of climate change, food insecurity, and intercommunal conflict. South Sudan previously hosted over 457,000 refugees and asylum seekers from various countries and more than 2.2 million internally displaced people.
As we speak, more than 9 million people, or 76% of South Sudan's population, require humanitarian protection and assistance. Of them, 54% are children, 27% women. A total of 7.1 million people are acutely food insecure, an increase of around 1.5 million people since last year. South Sudan is the country worst hit by the displacement crisis caused by the conflict next door, after Chad. Almost 780,000 people have fled to South Sudan since the conflict began on 15 April 2023. More than 580,000 of this number are South Sudanese returnees. Many are arriving also in areas already deprioritized for assistance. They are often malnourished, in poor physical condition, and require life-saving assistance.
Meanwhile, as South Sudan grapples with more arrivals, a new cholera outbreak is threatening refugees and displaced communities in Sudan. Of particular concern is the spread of the disease in areas hosting refugees, mainly in Kassala, Gedaref, and Jazeera states. In addition to hosting refugees from other countries, these states are also sheltering thousands of displaced Sudanese who have sought safety from the ongoing hostilities.
Now to Sudan, where fighting has now been continuing for 500 days. Hospitals are shutting down, and life-saving supplies are running out. Outbreaks of cholera, dengue, malaria, and measles are taking lives and putting further pressure on the health system. WHO is particularly concerned about the situation in El Fasher and surrounding areas in North Darfur, with famine already reported from the Zamzam camp. WHO has verified more than 100 attacks on healthcare since the conflict began. WHO recently deployed 51,000 doses of oral cholera vaccines in Kassala state, which has a high number of cases. The International Coordinating Group on Vaccine Allocation has approved a request for more than 450,000 doses to be sent to scale up the vaccination campaign in Kassala state. But much more is needed to stop diseases from spreading and avert famine in parts of the country. A ceasefire and unhindered humanitarian access is the best way to stop the health crisis worsening.
The recent cholera outbreak has resurged after several weeks of heavy rainfall and resulting flooding. The risks are compounded by the continuing conflict and dire humanitarian conditions, including overcrowding in camps and gathering sites hosting refugees and those displaced by the war. Medical supplies are also limited, as well as health workers. In addition to the spread of cholera, increasing cases of waterborne diseases, including malaria and diarrhea, are also reported. Constraints in humanitarian access are also impacting response efforts. In White Nile, Darfur, and Kordofan states, home to more than 7.4 million refugees and internally displaced Sudanese, access challenges have delayed the delivery of critical medicines and relief supplies. And finally, in a refugee camp in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the board game chess is offering children a sanctuary from violence. It's part of an initiative called the Chess in the City, aimed at teaching critical thinking to young people who have been traumatized by decades of conflict.
These children have known little but conflict all their lives. But this refugee camp where they live is providing a modest arena for cultivating peace of mind. Once a week, the displaced youngsters living at the Focus Congo camp in Kibati, Eastern DRC, learn the strategic board game from the members of the Soga Club chess team, a group of young enthusiasts from nearby Goma. The Chess in the City initiative, founded by 24-year-old Akili Bashigi Rwanda, aims to use the cerebral game to provide an outlet and teach critical thinking to children traumatized by decades of violence in the unstable region.
We've been suffering war and violence for over 3 decades now. I myself was born into war and violence. So for us adults, it's somewhat possible to cope. But for young people, we want to break this infernal cycle of violence. Firstly, by occupying their minds, because chess eliminates stress. It manages stress. It gives people the opportunity to find peaceful solutions to problems. So that's why we're much more interested in them, so that chess can bring peace, and so that they can rediscover themselves, rediscover logic.
Lacking even tables, the makeshift outdoor chess classes see the boards covered in a thin layer of plastic simply placed on the dirt as the coaches teach the children how the pieces move and let them apply the lessons through practice matches. The focus and concentration on the children's faces is a world away from the insecurity that has marred their young lives in a region plagued by militia violence and ethnic tension.
What we do here is we go against all odds. When I proposed the idea to the club in particular, it was like madness. How are we going to teach the children living in the displaced persons camps to play chess? You can see for yourself how we teach them. People have even said that because these children are in the camps, they can't be intelligent enough to learn chess. But it's exactly what people are saying about the children that revolts us. And I think that's what drives us forward.
Claude Boenge, director of the Focus Congo Association running the camp, says the chess program has transformed the daily life of children who were once scattered playing dangerous games.
These children were scattered. They were playing dangerous games. But since we started this activity here, you can see for yourself how very, very concentrated they are. And we say to ourselves that if we had the means to look after them every week, we wouldn't have children roaming around Focus Congo village begging. But here, they're so interested, so concentrated. We tell ourselves it was worth it.
The ultimate goal, Luenda says, is to train the young players to compete in major tournaments, potentially representing Congo internationally, and allowing them to discover the world and discover the peace that exists outside the violence they live in.
And that's the program today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.